I return! We're back! Hooray! We're back. Also using the camera mic this time because I'm gonna be honest, the other camera's nice, bit of a pain in the ass to set up, and also the mic is also a nice thing, but both times I previously used it, it sounded very bassy, and I don't want to do that to you guys. And I don't know why it sounds like that. Like, if you were to watch the reaction videos and stuff like that, like the Arc 5 reaction, all that sort of shit, it doesn't sound bassy there, right? It sounds nice, it sounds crisp, all that. For some reason I use it here, it's bassy, no matter how much I space it out. So, we're just going to do it this way today. I will figure that out for a future review, something like that. But we're back. Look, the shelf has room now. Not for long, because, I mean, the Chainsaw Man, there's two of the Bleach novels. Not the first one, though. There's fucking Arc 4 here, Dorohedoro, and then there's also, like, the latest Fist of the North Star volume. So, I gotta put all that up. You might even notice in the small corner of the screen, essentially, you can see Spy Family there. You can see Original Sin. Well, I guess you can't really see that because Spy Family is blocking it. Death Note's there, Devilman, all that. I did need some space, so some stuff had to go down. But, depending on how my plans work out and everything, I do kind of intend to have the shelves kind of widened out a bit. So, the nice thing is most of these can actually go back up. And then we will probably run out of room again some point later in the future. With that said, let's get to the Arc 9 review, shall we? This will actually probably be a shorter review because I'm not going to have much to say about the first 6 chapters. I mean, I'll mention stuff and I'll mention the stuff I like, but I'm not going to have much to say about those, and it is 13 chapters long. Let's go! Now, the 2 chapters we start off with are good, but I do think they are a little simple for coming back. It's essentially wrap-up, because the obvious thing is, we just finished Arc 8, we all know how Arc 8 ended, so it is kind of the thing of, okay, we now have to go from that point to Arc 9, right? Like what we're doing with Arc 9. So a lot of this just does involve characters talking. Some of it is pretty nice. But some of it also just does go on for a long while, maybe a little bit longer than it needs to, right? The biggest thing, in my personal opinion, is the immediate start of the whole thing, is Yorna, or Iris, talking to Ugard, and essentially saying her farewells. It's a pretty sad scene. I like it. I like it a lot. It builds a lot for her character in Ugard, and it kind of just shows a whole lot about that. Like, he's essentially going without what the other zombies were kind of trying to do, where they were like running off or trying to survive or whatever it may be, like, oh, they're back to life so they might as well just live, you know, all that sort of shit. He's just accepted the fact that, nah, I'm dead. I'll go. Right? He's like, oh yeah, my love will join me eventually, but for the time being, I'll go. And it's very interesting for the character. It makes sense given the general personality we've seen from him, but it's interesting. I like it. Then we get Petra talking to a whole bunch of people where, you know, we learn about, like, Kathma and all that, and it's like, oh yeah, he went all the way to, like, first class, holy shit, you know, he now gets to be one of the generals, that's, like, awesome. And then also they partially talk about Priscilla a little bit, where it's like, yeah, people were obviously going to be affected by that, and it's kind of shocking to see that, oh, everybody already knows by now, right? Like, it makes sense to a certain degree, because yeah, of course that news would be spread around immediately, but it is a thing of like, wow, alright, yeah, we know, huh? And even the next chapter discusses it, where we have a whole lot of developments here, because Garfield's trying to heal a whole bunch of people, like Old Man Olbert, or like Moguro and all that, who is actually still there. Well, I mean, I guess he's not really healing him, but you know what I mean. Groovy's there though, he's being healed. Moguro is there, like I mentioned, but I do want to also note, he is essentially factory reset is the best way to put it. He isn't the same person he was, but he's slowly learning, he's slowly being told. And then, like I mentioned, Priscilla is still taking a toll on people because it is some really damn heavy news, right? This is not the first time we've had this happen in the series, like I mentioned that with the last review, but it is something like, yeah, with how little it does happen, and with how important of a character this is, and how vital they were to the whole plan, you can't blame them at all. Also, for clarification, because my dumbass forgot, I meant the Priscilla part with Anastasia and all that, because Anastasia and, like, Bursets, who isn't executed thanks to Cecilis's and Vincent's words and all that, and also Otto, they were all discussing shit, and that's when Priscilla was brought up. My dumbass forgot. I had it in my notes, and my dumbass forgot. So, there we go. And then we have a chapter about both Rem and Rem, and I'm actually going to talk about Rem's scene first, because that one is a little bit of the lesser scene. It's still good by all means, but it actually does feel like the lesser scene in this chapter, which is funny to say that in retrospect, because her scene does focus on her, and the Rem one I'm alluding to doesn't really focus on her that much. She is just kind of there as commentary. But let's focus on Rem for a minute. We get a nice conversation between her and Katya, which serves as a conclusion to their friendship and all this sort of shit. It is really damn nice. I like it a lot, right? It feels like this builds up from, I think it was like, what, volume 5 of Arc 7? Something like that. All the way to here. It's pretty damn nice. Like it a lot. But let's focus on the Rem one. We get Flop and Tarita talking to each other, which, I'll be honest, it's kind of shocking that it's been decently long since the two did speak. I mean, it makes sense given the scenario that Flop was locked up for a while and Tarita did get screen time, but I think she did suffer the same fate as a lot of characters here of screen time, but not an insane amount, right? She got a lot with 7. I think when it came to 8, they kind of toned that down a bit, and that's a little unfortunate because she felt like a main staple of the team, right? Like, I had felt like when I read Arc 7, just because of the obvious scenario with Subaru and all that, I had assumed it was like, oh, Tarita, Medium, all this sort of stuff, like those are our main cast here for this arc, right? In actuality, not really. Medium does get a decent bit of focus throughout the whole arc and all that. Tarita does kind of slow down there, and it's unfortunate because I was liking her a whole lot, right? Anyways, the cool part is we get a very exciting conclusion with her and Flop here, because Flop's discussing a whole bunch of shit about, his sister and Vincent and all this sort of stuff going on, and just the battle being won, whatever it may be, all that, and Mizelda and Ram are watching, giving their own commentary to each other, all that sort of shit. And immediately, there's a fun little conversation with Flop mentioning, doing what you want to do, right? Like all this sort of shit, just going for it. It doesn't matter the scenario you're in, all that sort of shit, which is actually very motivating to see, right? I do sort of try and employ that with my own work and everything like that. Like, hell, even my videos, I do think about that sort of logic. Not because of this chapter, but, seeing it here does kind of help build that, right? But Flop goes over that whole sort of thing. And immediately, he then follows it up by asking if Tarita would like to get married to him. And that's a heavy question to ask, right? But it's also the thing of, well, she's the chieftain and everything, so it's kind of hard for her to take on that role, because that implies he has to go back with her, which would be fine if his sister wasn't married to, the emperor. So he has to stay there, because he is a sibling, right? So it's kind of the torn paths and everything. Until Mizelda steps in and coyly says that Tarita's no longer fit to be chieftain. She'll take over, despite, her scenario. And Tarita can just go on and live her life. which very clearly isn't her being serious. That's not her trying to say, oh yeah, you're not fit to be chieftain, fuck you, right? It's not her trying to actually say that. She's just being, like I said, coy about it. But it is a really great moment where she shows her support and just says, no, do it. You don't have to bring him back, anything like that. You can't say no because of the scenario of, well, I have to go back and you have to stay here. It's your choice now. It's up to you. And I like that a lot. That is, like, legitimately a really heartwarming moment. I am very happy to see this conclusion because I was kind of worried, like I mentioned, with Torita's screen time and all that. I was kind of worried that this relationship that was blooming a little bit between the two of them wasn't actually going to get a conclusion. I am so happy it did, right? I was worried it was just going to be a small thing and that was going to be it, and we wouldn't see much of it after that. Very happy that Teppei gave this a proper conclusion. And now, these next two chapters. Remember how I was saying the heavy toll of Priscilla's death was taking on a whole lot of people and all that sort of shit? Even the part that I forgot, that was great, wasn't it? Anyways. So, I talked about that and the heavy toll it takes. And let's talk about this chapter first. So, we get Emilia and Madeline interacting, which is very interesting because the obvious thing that Madeline points out is these two were fighting before, right? Like, I mean, from Madeline's perspective, it could have been to the death, right? Emilia probably wouldn't intend for that, but from her perspective, it could be, yeah, to the death, some shit like that. In fact, they fought twice. I wrote down in my notes that it was like, oh yeah, they fought before, but then I actually forgot, oh yeah, they also fight later when fucking Mazoria appears. So, yeah, no, it was twice that they fought. So it's fair for Madeline to just be like, no, leave, right? Like, I'm willing, you know, you helped out, whatever, that's fine. Leave, right? I'm giving you this one chance. But then the two actually start to talk more and more. And it's a thing of Madeline is going to protect the country because of, you know, Balroy, essentially, right? Even if he's gone, it's the country he loved, so she's going to protect it. But Emilia, who's now actually essentially just broken down, right, because of the heavy toll, like I mentioned, right, somebody she wanted to really be friends with, which, I can't say anything. I can't. If you see my notes on Twitter, yeah, you'll see something in there in regards to that, and I wanna say something. I want to, but I'm not going to. But, you know, the whole thing of her wanting to be friends with Priscilla, all that sort of shit, it's a lot for her. And, you know, Madeline gives her a shoulder to rest on and mentions, you know what? I'm protecting it for him, but just because of this whole scenario with you and everything, this isn't to like repay some debt, nothing like that. Still don't like you, but at the same time, if this is, you know, the country that they also liked, I'll shoulder that too. And I like it a lot. It's like, oh, that's good. Then Schultz shows up and he's working real hard because he wants to essentially live up to the role that she provided to him. And then Heinkel shows up and he is very desperate. Like, I had recently seen, you know, Arc 5's first episode, and I didn't want to say a word because I realized the whole thing of like, oh yeah, like thanks to, you know, Priscilla and all that, the we can fuck you over at any time, like felt all that sort of shit, right? Like, you know, you're under my jurisdiction and all that sort of shit. And then I see this, and it's just like, yeah, I don't want to beat the man while he's down, but Priscilla's gone now, so there ain't like some other candidate who can get the upper hand thanks to you now. She's just gone. But Heinkel's not taking it too great. He is desperate. He is trying to find somebody who can help him, which makes sense because I haven't read his side stories, but I have the general info on it. Like, it's, to my understanding, it involves his wife and everything like that, right? I'm pretty sure. So, it's a thing of, yeah, I can see why he's desperate for this sort of thing, but it is kind of unfortunate because Emilia's not going to take him. And who knows if Felt would, I mean, I don't even know if he would go to Felt, right? Maybe out of desperation, sure. Krush is debatable, right? I mean, Wilhelm's there, and I'm not saying, like, that they're gonna just absolutely hate each other or some shit like that, but I don't know that it'll be the most stable connection between them. This family does seem a little fucked. And then there's Anastasia, I guess, but does she get anything from having him? Who knows, right? That's the thing. And he does get knocked out by Madeline, because he's getting so desperate that Madeline just goes, yeah, knocked him out, you can heal him, whatever, he's being annoying, let him rest. And then we have the next chapter, which, again, kind of goes more into the Priscilla stuff. But first, we have Subaru getting, like, essentially punched by weights for everybody that was in the Pleiadius battalion, which is a lot. That's a lot of fucking people. But it makes sense, and it's exactly what I thought for this scenario, of none of them really want to do this to him, right? Yeah, he lied to them. It's a little shitty, but he apologized, right? They still like him. He was still willing to, like, support them, and they supported him and all this sort of shit. There was a mutual friendship between all of them. And even if he lied about his identity, they just say, who gives a shit, right? It's like, cool, he apologized, it's fine, right? But he wants to be able to apologize via this atonement, right? The Sparka sort of stuff. So he is getting punched a shit ton every single day to make up for it. And it's kind of hard to watch or read, I guess, because it is just like, I get why he does it, I really do, but I do feel the same way as some of the Pleiadius battalion of, like, man, he doesn't have to go this far. I get why he does, but it doesn't have to go this far. And obviously it's his obligation to, you know, continue this. But man... Anyways, I talked about the Priscilla stuff, right? So let's now bring that to Subaru and all that. Because he goes to talk to Vincent, and Vincent doesn't really give a shit, right? The biggest thing is he's just like, yeah, I mean, it happened, I've accepted it, all this sort of shit. And Subaru's trying to argue with him that he hasn't, right? But it's something you slowly start to realize in that scene, where just bit by bit, with every line, you kind of notice, oh, Subaru's not arguing with Vincent about Priscilla's death and how he should, you know, think about this more, kind of acknowledge it more, grieve for it more, right? All that sort of shit. He's talking about himself. He's talking about how he's focused on all sorts of shit at the moment and all this, and can't really accept the fact that he couldn't save somebody. That, yeah, he's talking about himself. This was never about Vincent. And that hits real hard. But, yeah, honestly, for the sake of, you know, kind of concluding what was, like, had happened at the end of Arcade, I think these chapters talking about the death is really damn strong. Like, it is just so good to see this acknowledgement in such a way where it does feel like there is weight to that death, right? Obvious, it's the first time, really, that we've had, like, such a major death in there. Like, you could be like, oh, Shawa and all that. But that's, like, that's kind of, you know, it works the same way, but I think I mentioned it in my review, of it's not necessarily the same level of weight, because this is a candidate, this is somebody who was relevant for the past 3 arcs, and I mean, shit, the only time they weren't relevant in between all of this was, like, the even arcs, excluding Arc 8, right, which is, you know, they're most important, of, like, yeah, Arc 6, Priscilla wasn't really that important there. Arc 4, she wasn't really that important there, right, like, she wasn't the prominent character overall, but it's like 3, 5, 7, 8, they're really important for all of those, so it is a thing of, like, I think she holds a lot more weight in that regard, right? And then we have our final Wallachia chapter, like, literally this is the end, chapter 6, right? We get our, essentially, farewell, because Spica has arranged something, right? We don't know what at first, but it's later revealed when we have, like, you know, Subaru and Rem there, that, oh, she's staying here in Wallachia to take care of the remaining zombies. She's going to send them to Odd Lagna, right? So it's like, oh, she's actually essentially doing her original sort of thing as Louis, right? But instead of just, remaining in there herself, she's kind of returning everybody to there in a sense of just like, oh yeah, all these zombies, no longer zombies, just outright dead. Off you go, right? Makes sense. But it is kind of the sad thing of, oh, she's not joining us. That's very interesting, and also a little sad. You'd think she would, considering it's, like, Spica. She's that important, but it's like, I guess not. Okay. I suppose we'll see developments later, or maybe she'll return. This is a One Piece sort of scenario where, yeah, she'll be back in a few arcs from now, right, to join the team, whatever it may be. But yeah, for now, she's gonna be gone. We do get a moment where, like, Subaru is having trouble accepting that as well, but we have this cutesy sort of scene where he and Rem kind of hold each of her hands and they just walk down, and it's real cute, and it almost reminds me of the Slothif Tatsuki Fujimoto image, but instead of Tatsuki Fujimoto, it's Teppei. So anyways, the other remaining part of this chapter is everybody, kind of just saying their farewells, both on the Wallachia side and also on Subaru's side. Now, the big thing is Subaru saying goodbye to the Palladius Battalion, is saying goodbye to Tenza and Yorna, who Tenza mentions, this won't be the last time we probably meet, we'll meet again and everything, you don't have to treat it like we're gone forever, all that, which I'm very curious on how that will play into later arcs. Maybe this will be like some, final arc, they have to do this big massive war and then everybody shows up to support them. That would be very interesting. I know that's a little cheesy, a little campy, whatever it may be, but I like that a lot, right? I like that idea a lot. And the type of cheese that it is to me is Gouda, right? That's some good shit. But we have him saying his farewells. He says his farewells to Vincent. They're still not huge on each other, but they accept the fact that they both helped each other, all this sort of shit, and they can say their farewells in peace, right? There's no real just like hatred between them and all that sort of shit. I mean, there's probably some dislike there, right? They probably don't like each other too much, but there's no hatred. They just say their farewells. It's nice. And that's it. We're finally out of Wallachia. Technically, because there's an interlude chapter where we learn about Katya, and presumably Todd has shown up, possibly as a zombie, who knows? I mean, it's not fully revealed on if he is or not. I personally don't think he is, because, I don't know, even though it's not necessarily immortal, I feel like the dude transforming into a werewolf and then the only thing he receives in terms of an injury is, axe to, like, the head. Yeah, that would probably hurt, but a lot of depictions of werewolves are a little bit stronger than just a simple tool in the head, right? That said, swung by an Oni, who, doesn't know that they're an Oni, but swung by an Oni, so that would be a pretty strong swing. But I don't know, to me, doesn't really feel like he is a zombie. I just personally believe that. He could be, that's fine. Honestly, still works. I just personally don't think it. Anyways, he kidnaps Katya, and they just run off. And it's kind of nice, because it is the scenario of if Todd were to come back, right? Like, if he were a zombie, it would be the problem of they would have to get rid of him. However, if he kidnaps her, and then they run off to who knows where, and they live happily ever after, that works. That works just as well. It's kind of interesting that his character resolution, despite being such a cold-blooded, like, calculated killer that really works well for his character as a, essentially, villain, right, as an antagonist, it's kind of interesting that he does get such a peaceful end, where it's just like, oh yeah, he gets to live with his wife, or fiancé, whichever of the two terms we want to use. It's nice. I do actually kind of like it. It subverts the norm, but it's good that it does that. And now we have our first chapter out of the Empire, and this chapter, in retrospect, after finishing the whole thing, is so fucking crazy to actually thinking about, like, in terms of just the narrative, because I'll explain it, and then I will talk about it more later. But the general thing here is everybody has their own tasks to do, right? Al wants to go to the tower, right? To the Pleiades Tower, all that, because he wants to find the Book of Dead, like for Priscilla, like, you know, the Book of the Dead. I don't know why I removed the there, but you know. He wants to find that. And a lot of the group is willing to help him out, like Subaru, Beatrice, Garfield, right? Melee actually gets to show up as well, which is really great. Glad to have her back. All this sort of shit, right? And Petra. Petra also gets to go, which is nice because you get to see the two of them interacting as friends. It's nice. So they got a few of them there, helping out Al. And everybody else is going to go their own separate ways. Some of them need some rest, like Ram and Ram. Amelia and all that, and Roswell, all that sort of group kind of has to inform people about what happened with Priscilla, or they have to focus on certain other tasks, whatever it may be. So it essentially leaves, you know, our heroes in their group that they're in, right? So now they're ready to head back towards the tower. I also realized, thanks to these chapters, that it somehow didn't hit me when I was reading Arc 6. I mean, I don't think it did. Maybe my review pointed it out, and I just totally forgot. But it's now hit me that the reason that Satella showed up when they were at the tower, right? The reason that they were sent all the way across to, like, Wallachia, all this sort of shit, was because Louis looked into Return by Death. She learned about Return by Death. I didn't even think about that, right? Because the connection they make is Echidna, right? Like, something they point out is like, oh yeah, Echidna in Arc 4. Super talks about it with her, and at first you think nothing happens, and then he goes back, and she's there, right? She's just walking around. So it's the thing of, oh, that makes a lot more sense now. I was honestly confused. I was like, what the fuck was the activation, right? Why did she show up? Why did they go to Wallachia? All that. But it makes sense now if it's, oh, all it was Louis kind of took his memories, looked into them, well, not, you know, that sort of thing, then saw Return by Death, all that sort of shit, and as a result of seeing it, it was the thing of, oh, there she is, right? That activated her. It makes a lot more sense now, but it's like, huh, I didn't consider that at all. Anyways, our team is set, they're ready to go. We have a whole bunch of conversing, and also Melee points out that she is officially free, right? There's no longer this, like, oh yeah, here's this, you know, assassin, arrest her, right, even if she's a child. No, she's got her freedom. Apparently that's something that these side stories kind of discuss a lot more. I haven't read them yet. I guess I probably should, because it's also going to involve shit in this arc, because there's already stuff in this arc that involves them. I'm not going to complain about the side stories too much. I just, again, to pay, please, if you're going to make them integral to the plot, put them in the actual plot. Don't regulate them to side stories. I know it's a thing that helps sell volumes, but it's fucked up for people who are trying to just read the series, like online, where you are posting this the most, right? But also we get Klein showing up, and wasn't too ecstatic about that. Luckily his bum ass leaves the next chapter, so I don't even have to worry. Now there's not actually too much to essentially mention with the next two chapters, which is kind of fucking crazy, because at this point we're at, I think, chapter 9 and 10, and this is right before the biggest shit in the arc happens, right? I mean, should be noted, it goes to 13, so there's 11, 12, 13. Sound good? Alright, if you are watching this, maybe not as you go, but if you are just watching this without Arc 9 context, have fun for the reveal that's about to happen when we get to chapter 11. Alright, anyways, chapter 9. We are at the tower. It was weird that I started there a little bit. I was terrified of the tower, I guess. I don't know. I mean, technically, after what happened last time, you can't blame me. Anyways, we're at the tower, and Felt's camp is there. This is also part of the side story sort of stuff in a sense. But Felt's camp is there to essentially just be both lookout in a sense, but also study, everything in there. Most of the stuff that they had to worry about, shower, raid, or breed, all that, gone, right? The only thing that's left is the dragon, and I mean, Satella's still sealed in there, but it's not like any of them are gonna open her up, out of that. So, overall, tower's pretty safe. There's some mobbies outside. They don't have to worry too much about that, though. But essentially, we just get, oh yeah, here's Felt's team, and then also Al's talk about Priscilla's book, which is something I want to point out. The way he talks about, why he wants to see this book, all this sort of shit, is very interesting. His words don't imply specific things, right? It doesn't imply, oh yeah, I'd like to know what she was like before, I met her, or whatever it may be, all that sort of shit. He is very vague when he speaks here. He says some things that make it seem like, oh yeah, okay, that would make sense for him wanting to read the book, but at the same time you sit there and you go, I don't know. He sounds contemplating, about this whole thing. He sounds like he's trying to figure out some options, all that sort of shit, right? And the next chapter kind of builds into that a little bit about, theories regarding Al, because they're looking at the dragon, they're talking to it, all this sort of shit. They realize, oh yeah, this thing's senile. Amelia was not kidding. This thing does not have any memory left. But while they're doing that, one of the dudes, Ezo, I believe is his name, walks upstairs and discusses some theories with them. And he's like, well, Al could just be trying to become Priscilla, but not necessarily in the sense of actually becoming her, because there's a limit to essentially the knowledge you absorb from the books. You're not going to be outright become the person, but to a certain sense, you can gain a lot of info to a certain degree of resurrecting them, right? It's weird specifics in there, but it does make a lot of sense, right? Now, something he points out is the more and more you read, the more knowledge you essentially gain of different things, right? So, if you read, for example, let's say Echidna's book, right? If you could read Echidna's book, boom, you read Echidna's book. From there are multiple paths you can go down, because now that you have knowledge on Echidna, you have knowledge on the people she's interacted with, right? That's really fucking cool, and that makes a lot of sense. Because it's the thing of the books only work if you know the person. But if you know the person, and you read their book, and then you move on to the next book, and you read that person's book, it works. Because you technically know them now. So it's like, alright. So, that's also part of it, right? It's kind of just reading more and more books in that regard. That's something you can do, and as a result, you can kind of build yourself in such a sense to having knowledge like that person once did, whatever it may be, right? Al seems sort of suspicious with this whole thing going on. It's kind of sad if this is the route he's trying to take in terms of, what happened with Priscilla and all that. But I'm just gonna say it now. I can promise you, that's not the route he's taking. I also want to point it out in my notes, but I did realize, because I saw some of the illustrations, I wanted to look at them as I was going, right? I was making sure I wasn't going too far. I had already seen the spoiler well ahead of time. In case anybody's wondering, oh yeah, I saw these spoilers, both, right? Both for 11 and chapter 13. I saw both on my Twitter way before I even read Arc 9. Right? Before I even started, whatever it may be. Before that shit was even fully translated, I saw that shit in my feed. So, very cool. I think we as a community, I mentioned this on my reaction videos, but I think we as a community really need to tone down how easily we talk about spoilers. But I did look at the illustrations as I was going, and I do really like that. I believe her name is Flam. I realized something when I saw her design. I saw it and I went, I've seen that before. I swear that was one of two people that were around Felt when she was walking in Arc 3. But in that regard, I'm like, I also know that character is related to two other characters I know, I'm pretty sure. And I double checked, and yeah, that is one of two children to the, I don't know if I would say absolute sort of like cutest, but definitely one of the cutest couples in the series from the EX novel 2 and 3 stuff. So very nice. I am, like I mentioned it in my notes, but I am glad to see that they are still essentially serving the Estrella family. Like they're serving Reinhardt, so by proxy, they're still serving them. Little interesting to actually serve Reinhardt in a way, just because of the, scenario with the person that their family would be previously serving, but that's okay. We don't blame him for that. So before this chapter even starts, I want to discuss a small thing, kind of like it. Interestingly, Arc 5's first episode, which I guess technically counts as, the actual novel itself and everything, has 2 lines in there that are also used with Arc 9. So I just assumed that Tepe was, kind of helping out with the season, and then sat there and went, I can use these. Kind of funny to think about, right? It's the crying line, and then it's Subaru being like, oh, like, Beiko's so lovely, all that. Real great. Anyways, chapter 11, here we fucking go. Okay, I'm gonna skip over a good amount of stuff, right? I know that might sound bad. It's not like I'm actually intentionally trying to skip over. It's just, I think the big thing to discuss with this chapter is what happens. Because a lot happens here, essentially. We get Al talking to Melee and all that, and like Petra and all them, because they're making food. And Petra's a little suspicious of what's going on. And Melee's a little not caring, but maybe a tiny bit suspicious, whoever, Al may be, right, to her, all that. Whatever the fuck. But the more important thing to talk about with this chapter is Al. So, we get Subaru and Beatrice in the library. Now, one of the big things that is found, just like Arc 6, is his book, right? Subaru's book, right? So immediately he realizes that's there and goes, we have to hide this, right? Nobody else can read it because it's in, like, kanji or katakana or what. I don't know which one his name is actually written in, because I know you can write names in different ways and all that sort of shit. But nobody knows how to speak it, other than, obviously Al would. And the big thing is, can't have him read that, because if he does, or if even anybody else opens it, it's the problem of, okay, Satella will show up, and they might just head back to Wallachia, or the joke that Emilia made in an earlier chapter, like Gusteko or some shit. In that case, he should have read it, or rather had somebody, read it, whatever it may be. Anyways, other than me obsessing about that area and wanting to know more, so, big thing there. As Subaru being like, alright, Beatrice, we gotta hide this fucking book, because if this gets opened by anybody, this is a problem. So he puts it on the very highest shelf possible, right? Nobody can fucking reach that. And then Al shows up, and they have a discussion, because like Subaru falls down, and he's like, oh, like, chill, you don't have to get scared because of me, right? All that sort of shit. Yeah, he really did. He really should have been. Fuck. So, now they're talking to Al, and they're having this cutesy conversation between Subaru and Beatrice, but, they're discussing things with him and, how he might feel in this scenario with Priscilla, all that sort of shit. Very cool. Anyways, mid-fucking conversation, those two are sealed away. Remember how I said if you're watching this without having Arc 9 essentially in your brain, how you haven't read the chapters, all that sort of shit, that this should be interesting for you? Yeah. Al, mid-conversation, seals Subaru and Beatrice away into a little ball. This also is then followed up by the mention of his plan to destroy Natsuki Subaru as the end of the chapter. Okay. I don't know what the fuck is going on anymore. I'm sure a lot of people don't. I don't. The obvious thing is, okay, we knew the whole time that Echidna was some sort of teacher to Al, right? That was the very clear implication we had since Arc 7 and 8, right? But now we're getting a bigger understanding of that, and at the same time I understand less somehow because Echidna had planned to destroy him? Some shit? I don't fucking know. Let's continue, shall we? So now, with chapter 12, we get a whole lot of shit. One of the big things is Al is no longer referred to Al when he is talking, but instead Aldebaran. Very fucking interesting, right? Real great way to do it. Another thing is his, as I worded it, his bleach level planning, because they show how many attempts it took. Remember when I brought up that whole thing about everybody having their own plans for places they were going to go and things they were going to do, all that sort of shit? Yeah. Want to know who essentially managed to pull the strings and orchestrate all this stuff to go down the way it did? Al. Al is the one who did this. Every single one of them had multiple attempts in there, right? Rewound time, whatever the fuck we want to say, to make it so that this team was the team that it was, right? First off, Al has a spell for solely sealing off somebody, but if they have a witch factor. Now, problem is, 90% of the time, that ain't gonna work, right? And also it's the problem of, if Beatrice wasn't in that spell, fuck, right? Now he has to deal with that, and this is somebody who is very skilled with magic, right? But, thing is, this worked in his favor. Because Subaru technically does have one. Multiple, in fact, at this point. So, yeah, easily, there we go, right into the nice ball. But then, everybody else gets, just, essentially, I don't know necessarily how, but manipulated into the scenario of going down the path that they do. In terms of, oh yeah, we gotta go inform about Priscilla, whatever it may be. Oh, Frederica helping out instead of Petra, all this sort of shit, right? Holy shit, right? Just that whole thing. And we're not even at the end. So, obviously, Ezzo and Garfield try to beat Al's ass because of just what happened. Except Al constantly, kills himself, essentially, to rewind the time. And it is over and over again. And this is a plan that seems like it's real bad for Al, right? Because yeah, he has this ball and everything, he has them sealed up, but at the same time, he's going up against two real strong people, right? One real great magic user, and one real great fucking physical user isn't really the correct term, but just actual physical character, right? So, not a great matchup for him, except he is doing real well against them. And this all culminates in his master plan. Remember when they brought up the whole thing with the books and mentioning that, oh yeah, if you read them, you kind of learn more about that person and become that person in a sense, because your memories get filled with them. However, you don't really get filled with them entirely because you're yourself, right? Al is Al, that sort of thing. Yeah, that doesn't matter if you're senile. See where I'm going with this? The book Al needed wasn't Priscilla. Never was. It was his own. Because you know what he's been doing this whole time? Dying. So you know what that means he has? A book. And you know who we can use that on? Volcanica. Volcanica is now Al. There are two Als. One's a dragon, the other's Al. What the fuck? And now we have the shortest chapter of the whole arc. Which might sound fucking crazy because we are on the literal last chapter. And after everything that's happened, you'd think it would be pretty long. But no, we're actually on the shortest chapter of the arc. And it's Al wrapping things up. He takes care of Flam. He technically takes care of Petra and Melee. I mean, it's more so that they can't really do anything. Because if they do something, yeah, they can probably win against him. But it's the problem of Ezzo and Garfield are at the top. And if they do something, they won't have enough time to heal them. So it's basically oh yeah, you probably shouldn't worry about me. Because if you want them alive, choosing to fight me ain't the option here. And Al walks away, and Petra gives him a nice emotional scar that actually does the most damage out of everything he's received in the day, as they word it. And with that, he's off. You know, goes on the dragon, leaves. I mean, he's fighting Petrochet, but he's off. Until he's stopped in the middle of his flight by Reinhardt, who presumably will fight him on the next volume that we have. But for now, that's it. That's the volume. I don't necessarily know what to say, honestly. There's a lot here, right? This is a really good volume. This has me excited, right? I know that might sound strange, or rather it might sound like I'm like dogging on arcs 7 and 8, even though I do really like 8, right? It might sound like I'm dogging on those arcs, but it is the thing of, I do really enjoy them, but I think when I was going through those arcs, I kind of sat there and I thought to myself, you know, these are good, but I don't necessarily always feel excitement when it's like, oh, there's a new chapter on the horizon. I'm like, cool, I'll read that, right? Arc 9 has brought back that excitement for me, right? I think the easiest way to word it is some of the chapters in 7 and 8 were really damn strong, right? And that's when I was excited, right? The chapters where it was like, oh, they're in the like arena and all that, like the gladiator arena in 7 with like the, I think the 5th volume, maybe 6? I think it was 6. Or like the 4th volume with all the stuff with the 11 seconds and all that sort of shit, right? Even the 3rd was really good with 7, right? Or like with 8, right? The first volume of 8 is really strong. The second volume is also really strong. Like all those volumes are strong, but like the first volume there and all that and the shit with Todd and all that, where it's like, oh, he's the werewolf, and then you get the line from Rem from Arc 3 now being used again for Arc 7, all that sort of shit. That stuff was exciting. That stuff made me excited to read more, right? But I think Arc 9, when I was reading these chapters, I sat there and I went, this is the consistent excitement, right? Now that we are out of Wallachia, it's not like I didn't enjoy Wallachia, but now that we are out and we are back to this tower and we are learning more and there is suspicion about Al, and it's that suspicion that builds and builds till you get the climax, but now you have to find out why it's like that, right? So you keep going and you keep going. That's the excitement I look for, right? This has me very excited for the arc. I think I am really going to enjoy this. Teppei really was interesting by using the wording that Subaru is going to get some rest with this arc. Yeah, he sure is. He probably is going to be out for this whole arc, which should be fun. I am actually very curious on what that could mean for this whole thing. I'm really curious to see what like happens from here, what Al does, whatever the fuck even happens, right? It's crazy to think that we are having such a massive development. Essentially, not like this is not early, but what feels this early, right? Because we have like 13 arcs in total, some shit like that, right? There's still a ways to go. So it's kind of crazy that right now there's this big just moment happening, and it's like, oh yeah, we still have a lot to handle. Honestly, again, I don't know what to say. It floors me, but it floors me because it's that good. Absolutely fantastic. I am really looking forward to the next volume. My ass said this video would be probably shorter just because of the scenario, and I'm now sitting here seeing like the time on the camera kind of go down lower and lower in terms of like storage space and all that, and it's making me realize this video ain't short. I thought it would be because it's 13 chapters, so it's like I wouldn't have much to talk about, but whatever. Anyways, that's the video, peeps. Sorry for the wait on this. It was kind of the thing of, you know, I was finishing up everything, including stuff with the 10-year project, which obviously we'll be getting hints again soon, and in relation to it in a certain sense, I do have a video of a series I'd like to talk about very soon. Like, that should also be coming out within the time that this video is coming out. I'm going to aim for literally the same day I'm recording this, so Sunday. And then that video should be later down in the week, maybe Friday, something like that, right? I do hope you all actually check that out because it is an interesting series that is very similar to ReZero in terms of how it's written and everything. Not necessarily same genre, kind of is fantasy related, but definitely similar in terms of how it's written, so I recommend checking it out. It should be interesting, right? But with that said, that's it for this. It did take a while, like I noted. It was mainly a thing of, yeah, I was finishing up 10-year project, but then also I was busy with other stuff and all this sort of shit. And then I mentioned it in my community posts at the worst time I got sick, right? Literally the week of these reactions and stuff like that. Luckily, I was better, not perfect, but better by the point that Arc 5's first episode had come out. Still not necessarily perfect right now, but it's barely anything at this point, so I'm cool with it, right? Doesn't really matter to me too much. But yeah, there was a whole lot, and it's kind of unfortunate that it did take me this long. I did want to be up to date on it, right? Because I do like having my reviews out shortly after everything's translated, but I sadly couldn't do that this time, which is unfortunate. It's happened before, but I like to try my best in that regard, right? Anyways, now that all of this shit is done, now that this volume's done, and that stuff with the 10-year project done, all that, I will very, very soon, like literally, this isn't even a promise I'm breaking this time, I will actually very soon start working on my videos again and all that sort of shit. We are done Infinite Wealth. I mean, okay, technically speaking, not even like I actually broke a promise in that regard, because we are done Infinite Wealth. I did finish it, all that sort of shit. So now I need to stream it like one more time, possibly. I might even just record stuff. I said I was going to stream it one more time. I don't fully know, honestly, at this point. I just need to record all the side stuff that I can, right, whatever it may be. And then after that, I just finish making the video, right? I've already started working on the script for that. So that video will be finished. Excited to talk about Gaiden and Infinite Wealth. At this point, a whole ass fucking game about Majima in relation to it has been announced, which is crazy. I'm gonna have to mention that in the video. But that's on the way. More big videos on the way, obviously. Also, the thumbnail of this video might change. That might sound odd, but especially because it's like, oh yeah, I like Melee a lot, you know, I don't mind having her as the thumbnail for a video, of course, right? And I mean, Petra's also really nice, right? But it is the thing of, that said, I do want to actually do some of the art thumbnails I mentioned. The only reason I didn't is because right now I'm busy with other art stuff, and then also I was working on the 10-year project piece, and I kind of wanted a break after I finished that, right? So I wasn't going to do it immediately. But now that I'm finished pretty much a majority of that, but I still have some art stuff to do, at some point within the next month or two, probably, I will change this thumbnail. If I don't, it's probably just going to stay the same way, but I might actually make my own thumbnail for this video that isn't just like, oh yeah, here's the cover, here's some text, that's it, right? I might actually do something extreme, where it's like, oh yeah, here's an actual piece that I make, right? If not now, I will probably do it for the next volume, because I am probably going to stay on top of that one the whole time. I am very excited for the developments and all that. That's essentially left for Arc 9. But yeah, that's it for this video. By the time that we're back next, this shelf will probably be even larger, which will be frightening. Maybe there'll be more shit on it in terms of figures and all that. I didn't even acknowledge Echidna, because I don't think she was here last time. I don't think she was. I don't know. But, well, I guess we'll see how this turns out by then. With that said, though, thank you all for joining me. Have yourselves a great night. I rarely promote shit, but I am just for a second, I'm just gonna mention the reaction channel is doing Arc 5 reactions. If you're interested, you can check it out. If not, that's cool. It's reactions. I don't blame you. I am very low effort when it comes to them, mainly because I don't view them as a proper piece of content, essentially, right? I do them to show off my reactions or to talk about certain things that I forgot to talk about in videos. Otherwise, I don't really give a shit about my reactions. I don't really put that much effort into them. So, it is a thing of like, you know, that isn't going to be the main channel ever. I don't intend for that, ever. It's just very, like, oh yeah, here's a reaction, just for fun. Like discussing stuff, like also, you know, discussing stuff with people in the comments and all that. That's fun too. I did that for one of the Wald Files reactions I did. But yeah, if you're interested, you can check that out. Otherwise, that's fine. Honestly, this channel's the like main focus pretty much all the time. So, all works out. Anyways, thank you all. Have yourselves a great night, and I will see you all next time. Farewell, peeps.